Hello, everyone. This is Tijen Genco, and you are tuned in to Coaching with Mastery and Elegance with Tijen Genco. I am Master Certified Coach and Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach. I have my wonderful companion Sajili Mohan Chawla with me today. Welcome, Sajili. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Wonderful to be here today.
Wonderful to have you as my partner today. And Sajili, would you like to introduce our audience where you are going to take us today, as well as anything you wanted to speak about yourself?
Sure. I think where I would like our conversation to go today is around embodiment and sovereignty, because these are terms which are used quite often, both in the leadership space and in the coaching space. So, really, to understand what they mean and why are they spoken about, what is the importance of it all, how it
Mm.
impacts a leader and a coach. And that I think is something which I'm quite curious around.
Thank you for doing that. Yes, I don't know if it's fully understood and appreciated, but loosely used, just like the term depression, right? People talk about I'm depressed, but there's a whole spectrum of that. So let's see what we're going to unpack today. So, where do you want us to start?
I think I would like to know, in your words, in your terms, what do you mean and understand by the word embodiment and the word sovereignty?
Thank you. So, I often spell the embodiment as embodiment.
Mm, mm,
So, with there are multiple concepts, and I'm going to come to this from various aspects of that. The one of which is philosophical aspect, which I speak more into that in my Sufi pathways to heart, the partnership with the universe.
mm,
Or whatever the term people like to use, right? That there is some force, some quality breathes life into us. We don't produce the breath ourselves. It's almost mouth to mouth
mm,
with that force, which is often called Rei or Ki or Chi or Jai or right? Prana. And there is that. And then when that partnership occurs, in when I teach yoga, I say that okay, then the mouth to mouth occurred, you're being breathed. What are you gonna do with that breath, right? How do we animate that breath into life? That's then our will, thy will and my will. I'll take the breath, I'll take the inspiration, and then the other view of this comes from the energetic teachings, right? When the inspiration arrives at the crown chakra or the kether in the different Kabbalistic terms, then it tells us a knowledge or a wisdom or some capability. We feel like I'm inspired to have a podcast today. I'm inspired to do that. And whether we act on that or not, right? So then the embodiment of that energy. So taking the energy in essence and turning that, there is an alchemy into physical act or turning that not into physical act. There is that the will, decision making is involved. So then the embodiment, and obviously, in order for us to act or not act on something, there has to be some level of knowledge about this planet, how it functions. right? Our social conditioning, how we are socially conditioned that we feel psychologically safe enough to act on, or we have energy enough to act on, or whatever, where we're going to cast that energy and essence into. There are more complexities of the energetic system that I'm not going to get into, but embodiment then is taking that in, running through our system. It's not only the wisdom of the mind, but there is also nervous system's reactivity, our visceral system's response, our emotional responses. All that systemic response then produces a particular outcome that means act or not act. It's a seems like a binary, but it is in a way. Even when it is, we're not expressing that externally. There is an internal expression of muffling that response or whatever it is. There is that. So embodiment or embodiment means that there is that wisdom and partnership with the energy toward particular outcome. That's how I see it. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the first thing I think about it is that it's not often that one gets to hear about embodiment in that sense, a larger context. One is typically hearing about a small habit and how do I embody that, and so on and so forth. But it's quite profound to really place yourself in the larger universal space and acknowledge that partnering. How beautifully you said mouth to mouth. It's like really that is how the breath is coming to us, and then the free will. Now, what do I want to do about it, or not?
Exactly.
And you didn't stop there. You also added another nuance to it, which was that it's not just a cognitive journey of the free will being exercised. It's more the whole, whether it's the visceral, the emotional, the physiological. It's all of us coming together to see, and therefore the embodiment of that prana or that energy, and coupled with our free will. I think I haven't heard about it like this. I haven't understood it like this. I haven't heard it expressed like this. So I think it's something I'd like to sit with for sure.
Yeah, thank you. I remember years ago listening a podcast. There was a botanist interviewed, and she was talking about how a leaf is actually a cooperation of millions of various different cells. So I see us the same because we have 300 millions or more cells. And this is why when I teach coaching and or change facilitation, I invite people to really appreciate different behavioral aspects of these cells, intelligent cells, into the response. Because let's say that your mind gives an order to the nervous system to go execute a particular function, but your emotions like, no, I don't feel safe. Can that execute? No. As an engineer, then I see that the gas and a brake response. One foot in the gas and right, that's what happens. So if we don't, as a change facilitator, appreciate all the complexity of the human organizing principle as well as organized principle or not so organized principle, then we cannot fully facilitate the support for the change execution.
Sure. And I think the whole gas and brake, even visualizing that would make it much easier for any one of us, even as a leader, to be able to pick up that information from whoever they are dealing with, just that visual can help us bring it alive.
Absolutely, yes.
And in this context, then, with this context of embodiment, what is sovereignty then, and how does that sit with it?
Yeah. So I often look at the origin, etymology of the words. And sovereignty seems like coming from a French word, really supreme governance. And I also looked at the Sanskrit word, which is really governing the self. So then how do we govern the self? If we think about 3 million of cells, who is governing and what is governing and what is going on, right? So, and this is why in my approach, I often use the word harmony, because to me, and that's where the biological clocks and biorhythms and all that come in when we look at the traditional Chinese medicine, for example, that in the traditional Chinese medicine, the organ systems has this superior times and inferior times. And to me, it's like the governance almost always shifting in the human system, that it's not like one thing is overriding everything. And there are, I think, when there is a trauma experience, then the trauma seems to be often overriding and disabling rest of the functionality, at least in certain cases. So coming back to the sovereignty, then the self-governance. And we a little bit earlier talked about the mouth-to-mouth with the universal sources and partnership. And then determining the right response, which to me is often harmonic response, hopefully, with the rest of the universe. But requires then the self-autonomy. That means that, for example, if something like you and I talked about it, would you be interested in continuing our podcast together? You determine that and you cast your choice toward it. But you could also say, I have too much thing going on and I don't want it. That would have been a different analytical response. But you could also say, oh my goodness, I really want to, but what if I don't look good? Or what if I did this, right? These are all systems response. Then what is the, I guess, most popular response out of your system, right? And is it, how do we determine that the sovereign response, if the sovereign's response comes from you, not necessarily, oh, what if what my neighbor is going to say? Then your power and autonomy goes into somebody else. You no longer govern your own response. You give your power away. So we give our powers to the governments, we give our powers to the neighbors, we give our powers to the conditioned response. And so this is why I like to take us to the higher levels so that we can determine unconditioned response, the pure, it's in own essence, right? That we know, like, oh, something really animates you. And then we start think about, what about this? What about that? And then we diminish that signal into almost nothingness. So the sovereignty is then one's full autonomy in making a choice, exercising the free will, which I often think it's not free. because of the conditioning. So freeing the will into a choice making, freely recognizing what the choice is being asked to make in every moment, and determining what the right response for the person is and exercising that. And for that, people often think that meditation is there for relaxation. To me, meditation has nothing to do with the relaxation. That is a side effect. But the meditation is to invite the awakened response, which I call that awakened leadership presence. Even you're leading you, right? So you need to be awake to see what is it, even if it is you're buying something in the grocery store, right? Not do it with the back of the spinal cord, but you're like cognitively, oh, this is that, this is this, I make a choice, and that's that. So sovereignty is that to me.
Well, don't we always get something which expands us and blows our mind? But yes, I do see how beautifully one almost sits on the other in that sense. Because if we think of embodiment like you described in terms of um, that mouth to mouth, it's something which is given to us. That prana is, that energy is given to us, and then to be acknowledging of that, and then to move to a space of self-governance or autonomy or power, and like you said, and then discern, how do I wish to use my will. That's an empowering place, really, to almost it's almost as if when we are blessed with prana, uh, how do we make the most of it? How do we make the most of it? And I'm all tempted, therefore, to also say that I heard in another podcast, I think it was with Dr. Hollis, which you did, where as a human being, then we are accountable for what spills into the world through us. You see, then that's the sovereignty one is speaking of, taking responsibility for that. And as a coach, when we are a partner with our client, then we can only take our client as far as we have traveled. Right? And if we haven't taken that journey ourselves of discerning and freeing our will, then well, it's a bit of a it's a little crippled, let me put it that way. Presence, in contrast to the awakened leadership presence which you speak about.
Yeah. It could be a little bit wobbly. And not as intentional, I think. Like if the client is so aware, you're just sitting there, even if you're not saying the right thing, they're going to lead themselves through it. But I don't know if you ever watched a baby elephant learning to use their trunk. If you haven't, I will invite to do it.
I will. Well, I think I have, but then the way you say it, I probably need to be more attentive with it.
It is the cutest thing. And they don't know, but then when they mature, right, they could actually crack the peanuts. It's so delicate. But when it's not exercised, it can be bubbly. I think that our attempt, whether we are a coach, psychologist, or whatever the profession, friend, a partnership into somebody taking them to the depths that they haven't been to, will be wobbly like that.
And I think this also therefore speaks into, or makes it rather obvious, why it's so important for us as coaches to keep investing in our own growth.
Yeah.
And in that sense, becoming more sovereign, if I can say that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mhm. I'm also reminded of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali,
Yes.
uh, wherein there are 5 modifications of the mind, and unless attended to, we can trip up over them. Whether it is, whether it is in terms of, they call it pramana, which is our own interpretation and judgment.
Mhm.
Then another modification of the mind is when it is our imagination. You see, we haven't really seen the full picture. We call it vikalpa.
Mhm.
And then there is also one where it's again a misjudgment,
Yes.
and again a remembrance, where smriti they call it, where we are holding on to the past. So there are, in various cultures, we speak about modifications of the mind, and uh, I think that's really what this whole working our way through without bypassing is what is coming across for me. So it's also making me then, you wear so many hats, other than being a master coach, a mentor coach, and training, and so on, and so closely associated with the ICF. So what do you feel is imperative for a coach to really keep in mind for their journey and their growth?
Yeah, thank you for also bringing the Yoga Sutras, which is something is quite important, at least a vessel for people to, I again use the word recognize, how we cognized to begin with, right?
Sure.
So I think that whichever the way, whether our audience is a coach or somebody in a profession to help another human being, or leaders, or whomever they are, or listening to us, hopefully for self-awareness. The thing is then, in order for us, as you used the beautiful word discernment, right, to meet the moment of decision making, we need to be aware, awake and aware every moment. And in that moment of awareness, which we call it metacognition, if we can actually elevate ourselves to the level to see what the programming is, even if we are unable to override it toward the free will, it still is helpful to break the patterning of unhealthy or an act of toward non-sovereignty, right? Because otherwise, social conditionings, I often say to people, whose fear is it anyway? Is it yours or your grandmother's? Because, right, we learn, don't do this, it's bad. Don't do this, it's bad. You condition to do it. But if you're not seeing why you do what you do, you will be keep doing it. And then who is governing your system? Is it you or your grandma? Right? Or granddad. I mean, that's that. We love culture so much, but culture comes with the cognitive errors. Whether it's the culture of the geography, whether it's the culture of the organization or governments or whatever it is, even the word, the language, right? It comes with its own thing. So how do we elevate ourselves into the level to see it, to even come to the point to determine, is it something I can change, or is it too much change for me is going to strip me out of my identity, formed ego, right? I will say to people that I have a form of an inquiry, which I teach it on my neurologic approach to coaching, called Genco method, reconstructive inquiry. They're basically looking at the constructed model, decision-making model of the person, and then collectively with the client, reconstructing that towards more freeing choice. But when I teach that, I say to people, make sure whatever it is okay for them to reconstruct. Because certain things, such as like a religious, deeply held belief, when you work with the client, with their desire and will, it could be too much, that then they have nothing to belong to anymore. So we need to really present these things to people also. So I think that all involves into level of seeing what is the mental construct and what is at play here, and how willing, able, ready, and capable am I to make the choice to have a different response to this. And this is why I often say that my coaching is transcendental. Because when we actually transcend into a new level of construct, then whatever makes the problem is no longer valid, because you don't think like that anymore. It's a completely different construct. So then it's sustainable. You don't need additional thing other than what it is. So yeah, let me stop here and hear your thoughts.
Sure. Yes. Yes, well, there are multiple thoughts I have to say, but let me see if I thread them together. I think what really struck me is that even the awareness of what is, instead of rushing into change, but the awareness of what is in itself is a powerful place, because within that awareness, something will shift.
Yeah.
That's one part of it. And again, that awareness also brings up not just fear, but it's also definitions of success. I mean, I'm working with a particular client, and it's a similar question I asked him about whose definition of success is he living up to and struggling with. Again, it's a cultural thing. So when all this kind of a conversation comes into awareness, and then not just for the client, but I think even for the coach or the leader to have taken that journey.
Yeah.
Because only when we take that journey do we know how challenging it is for us to be able to see our own truth, and to see how challenging it can be to make that shift, to want to make that shift, to overcome the resistance of it, and if we keep that flavor alive in us as a coach and as a leader, then I think there's a different kind of compassion which we can, and a holding which we can offer to our client as they take that journey. I think these are some of the thoughts which I was, which came up for me.
Yeah, the compassion, right? That it also influences the space towards the empowerment.
Sure. Yes. There's one other thing which I heard, which through this conversation, and of course I've heard it earlier, At times you speak about, look, in my neurological program, I offer this approach. In the transcendental program, I offer this approach. In the Sufi program, so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
So what has me curious is it's not often that we have a coach who offers a journey from so many fields, spaces, lenses, perspective. I'm almost reminded of that kaleidoscope. And as you turn it, you have this incredible array and design which keeps changing. So, Tijen, what has you designed such a variety of approaches?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think being an engineer, I look at the systems, and I'm also a seeker, right? As you said it, I've been looking at my mind and my cognition before anybody else's.
So,
Shifting the kaleidoscope and all that, and trained in body arts and sciences and yoga and meditation. It's the other aspect also. So multiple intent there that I often say to people that speaks more than one language, right? There is something going to be better said in one language than the other, better appreciated, understood in one language than the other, right? So therefore, each of these approaches meant to give language of access to change facilitation, whether it's in us or for being a partner to facilitate in someone else. So, and this is where I mentioned that leaving things on the table unattended. If the client says, for example, I'm quite frustrated, and coach hasn't explored their other dimensions other than the thought, or their cognitive conditioning is about the thought, then they're going to say, what are you thinking that makes you upset? Now, what happened? Coach already made the choice to explore what the client presented in the realm of cognition. In Kabbalah, there are 4 worlds: the world of thought, world of emotion, world of making things. So there are different worlds. But the thing is, client was presenting an emotional world, emotional experience. As simple as that. And the coach could respond, what informs you in your system that you're frustrated? Now, that's a very generic invite. Now, then the client says, I feel it on my chest. Oh, all right. Now we need to get into somatics. If the client says that I feel it in my system cannot make a decision, now we know nervous system is involved, and so on. So there are different pathways and access to human system. These are gateways, our visa, our passport. So that's why that I was giving different access points, like a neurologic approach, somatic approach, energetic approach, and now last few years I'm giving this philosophic approach to offer access points to the coaches, at least to recognize these larger patterning, to do their own work and appreciate different perspectives so that they are not single-pointed. They could then have these multiple language, knowing that as a human being, we're going to have a preferred language. That's okay. And maybe we're going to be like that baby elephant with the trunk in another language, but that's okay too, because the other client, the other, have their mastery in their trunk.
Mhm.
If we know how to follow, they can
Mhm.
teach us how to use that too.
That's, that's, what is the word that I would use for it? That it's how essential it is then that, when we say that respond to there is so much conversation about holistic coaching, meet the whole client. But how can I meet the whole client unless I have addressed the various aspects and accessed and at least taken that journey on to be a more holistic person myself,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. And otherwise, of course, I find as a coach myself, I find that even the thought that, my God, there's so much that information which a client gave, and there's a possibility that I could have left it just unattended on the table, that there's a heartache which comes with that, and a certain responsibility towards the sovereignty which you so beautifully explained.
Yeah, thank you.
I see that. Just a thought. You think the sovereignty will look different as we move towards a more AI world?
I
I mean, is
don't
there any
so.
correlation at all?
I don't think so. Scientists work on the atomic bomb, right? That there is an intent and there is the use of the product. So can something be misused and abused and all that? Yeah. And I don't know that AI needs to take over our sovereignty if we know how
Mm,
to partner.
mm,
And maybe right now we are the baby elephant with the trunk partnering, and AI is the baby elephant with the trunk. It's a new partnership. How do we partner and how do we stay sovereign? I mean, one can unwillingly or willingly diminish their power by giving it away
mm,
to another human being, to AI, to a government, to a choice, right? I think that if one is not aware, that can happen, but I don't think that is the destined future unless one chooses to.
Well, I must say that I've been listening to a lot of podcasts around AI, and yours has been the most succinct and balanced response, in the sense that, look, if we are aware, if we are habituated to diminishing our power, then that's one story, whether it's a person or a government or AI or whatever. And if we're more in awareness, like you said, the awakened leadership presence, um, and we do understand the autonomy, the fact that we do have a will and we can discern its use. um, I think that puts us on a good footing.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And I do, thank you for bringing that up. I do partner with AIs. And sometimes they present an idea. It doesn't fit, like, because I study multiple different dimensions of everything. And I said, what about that? And then the AI said, oh, that's an interesting point of view. And I said, can you give me cross-functional analysis? So then AI goes and researches and presents them to me. So it's all about how do we partner, right? I mean, I don't have to take their answer as the ultimate one. We still, as long as we stay cognitive cognitively aware in our body. I guess I'll tell a story to end this. My heart teacher does healing music.
Mhm.
And one day she invited me to go along with her to a common living facility for the people have experiences in dementia, Alzheimer, and so on. She goes and plays the music for them, and then specifically some of the songs that then when they recognize and so on. So I went with her. She was playing harp and I was in the little chimes and all that. When she started, there were maybe 20 some people. And as a person sensitive to energies, I was looking at empty vessels almost. There were body, but there were no governing spirit, animating spirit. It felt empty until then she started playing and they recognized some of the music. I could almost see that the animating force was coming and looking through their eyes, that presence returned into the governing the body, the partnership with the body. And I think that as long as we have that partnership with that animating force and the animated force, which is our body and our home in this planet, and as long as we do our best to care well for that shell that hosts us, and learn to push different buttons in the dashboard. Not only push one button because that's what we learn culturally, right? Get curious about, oh, what are the other buttons here in my dashboard? I didn't notice. And I think we will have a good life and fun life.
Wonderful, wonderful. And there is just one more thought. Even as I'm listening to all that you're saying and this beautiful story which you shared, there's also a sense that how okay it is to, whatever may be as a coach, as a leader, as a client, whatever, but how okay it is that, there are parts of me which I have not accessed, or which I have not clarified, or where I have diminished my power, and to start the journey to assimilate, to attend to become more aware, in a very respectful and compassionate manner. This journey towards sovereignty and embodiment and partnering and awareness can be within our own self a respectful journey.
Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah, thank you for that, Sajili.
Thank you, Tijen. Thank you.
Absolutely. And everyone, if you missed in the beginning, this is Coaching with Mastery and Elegance with Tijen Genco. We've been talking with my beautiful partner, Sajili Mohan Chawla here, about embodiment, empowerment, sovereignty, awareness, awakened presence. And if you liked what you heard, consider subscribing and leaving us a feedback. We want to thank already the people who have done so. And if you like to receive more resources like this, visit gencocoaching.com and you will find resources under the resources page. Anything else you wanted to add, Sajili, as we close?
I think there's a lot being said, and I'd like all of us to just let it sink in. Yes, yes.
Thank you, everybody.